Hey, what's up guys? David Alex here for Ideas to Creations, and welcome to this video tutorial where I'm going to be introducing you to Xpresso. This is sort of a prelude to an upcoming series which is going to be on thinking particles. Alright, so over here I have a bunch of shapes, and I'm going to show you how to get Xpresso to tie a few things to one another. And one thing I tend to do with Xpresso especially is to create this cube whereby its bottom left corner, or whatever you want to call that, it's negative x and negative z corner and negative y corner is always at the origin. So if I go ahead and change the width, the height, and all these values, you can see that it works out pretty well. So other stuff you can do is say tie the radius of one object to another, and basically we just want to get a hang of how everything works inside Cinema, so that when we get to thinking particles we don't have to worry about all that stuff. So how do we start working with Xpresso? Well, Xpresso in itself is sort of like expressions inside After Effects, that's the name, but it actually uses nodes, and it uses a node workflow, like you've seen in Nuke and other node-based software like Smoke and all those things. I think, is it Smoke? It should be Smoke. So what I'll do now is basically create a new null object, and this is gonna be my Xpresso tag. Basically it's a holder for the tag, and it's not actually gonna do anything else. And usually when I have nulls, I like to set this to none, so my viewport can stay nice and clean. And so I'm going to right click on this guy, go to Cinema 4D tags, and choose Xpresso. And now you have the Xpresso window that pops up. You start out in X Manager actually, and now you're ready to start. This is nice and empty and waiting for you to throw in some commands. So how do we get started? Wow, I don't know where to begin. Can right click and take a look at this menu here. We have new node, can add a bunch of nodes. You can choose to convert to X group. These are stuff you do way later, sort of advanced stuff. Change zoom, change view, change contents, and all sorts of stuff. So I don't usually use this menu as often, but it's good to take a look at it because you can do stuff like remove unused, show names, and maybe remove all connections depending on what you're doing. So let's go ahead and tie the radius of this sphere to the radius of this capsule just to get started. So I'll do that in top view because then we can see the capsule better. Go to garage shading, and we're going to the, not even Expo, let's go to X Manager, and then now we need to bring in these two guys, the capsule and the sphere, so that we can tie their radiuses together. So first thing, bring in the sphere just like that, and then bring in the capsule. So now we have two nodes which represent the sphere and the capsule, and these are basically object operator nodes, and they represent objects. That's what that means. So let's see. If you have a node here, you have two sides. There's a blue side and the red side. Input and output, or the in port and the out port. So in is blue, and that basically means that this node is receiving information, and in red it means it's outputting information. So in this case we want our what's this thing called? We want our capsule to give its radius to the sphere. So how are we going to do that? The capsule is the one that's defining the value, so it's going to be outputting it. So we're going to have to put it on this side, and then this one is going to receive. So we're going to create an out port for this called radius, which is going to output the radius, and then we'll have another one here on the blue side called radius as well, which is going to now receive information. In this case it's going to receive what its radius should be. So I have my capsule, gonna click on the red side, that's a left click, right click doesn't do anything, and we get a bunch of options here. We have basic properties, which is actually tied to the attributes manager. So if I right click, you'll find here, if I left click, you'll find basic properties, and all this stuff, display color, enabled, layer, name, all this stuff is what's in this basic tab here. So that makes life a lot more convenient. If you know you're in the object section and you want to do something there, just right click, go to object properties. There's all the guys such as radius, which is there, and all that sort of cool stuff. That's a capsule, and I'm looking at a sphere. Wow. So there it is, object properties, radius, render perfect. They're set in alphabetical order, not in this order. Okay, so capsule is going to output radius. So we're going to click there, go to object properties and choose radius. And then in the sphere, we're going to click on the blue side, go to object properties and choose radius as well. And then all we do is take this red guy, left click and hold, and then do that. Sort of just bring that there. And you can see the line is green, which means that is a valid connection. So that's good. If it's gray, it means it doesn't work. And it's red right now, but that's the color it turns when you've just done a connection or when it's selected. Oh, sorry, when one of the nodes is selected, you get that red line. So it doesn't mean that there's something wrong. And okay, so what's happening now? Our sphere, let's take a look at what happens if we try to change the radius. Nothing happens because it's receiving a radius from the capsule. So Xpresso gets a priority over anything else we can do. So we can't even preview what it would look like if we change this. But if I select the capsule, which is this guy, and you can check that, that's the capsule, and I start to do this, you can see that it's actually, the sphere is actually following through. And the radius is well, they're tied together. Simple enough, right? I'm sure it is. So that's how that works. Bring in your nodes and then tie them together. Now, what if we wanted to tie something else? I want to tie the Y position of this guy to the Y position of this guy. But, that's a bit too straightforward. How about if we took this and then made this the opposite? So if this guy went up, this guy went down. What we do is take our guys again. Now, our sphere, this time we want to output information from the sphere to the capsule. Now, before you start thinking about how you're going to tie this all the way back here, the good thing about Xpresso is that you can have as many nodes as you like that represent a specific object. So in this case, I'll take out my sphere here and bring my capsule again. And we're sort of working with a whole other bunch of calculations here. But these are still going to be taken into consideration. So I'll take the sphere, coordinates, global position, and we'll take global position Y. If you take if you take global position, that's basically X, Y, Z all combined into one float value, which is a vector. And that's stuff you want to worry about way later and not now. So I'll go ahead and go to coordinates, global position, and choose global position Y. And I'm going to optimize this so that we can see the whole name. And then I'll choose blue side and go to object properties, coordinates, global position, and global position Y. Now we know that if we tie these together, we're going to get a direct relationship. And just to be sure, let's take a look at what happens. I've tied that in. Nothing's happening just yet, but that's because it's still in this window. If I click there and say grab the sphere, you can see that now the capsule follows through and I can't move the capsule in Y. So cool, that's working. But we wanted it to be in the opposite direction. So in this case, we actually need to bring in some other nodes which are not related to objects, which are calculation nodes, such as adding, multiplication, sine, cosine, and all that stuff. All that stuff is actually in here. But actually, there's no but right there. So we'll go to new node, Xpresso, and you'll find a bunch of sections here. We have general, which has all sorts of things. Adapters for doing conversions, matrix to vectors, reals to vectors. You have bools, you have calculators, calculate options. You have scripts, logic, which is bool stuff again, sort of like switches. If this, sort of like using if else in expressions. For example, logic would be, okay, we'll get to that eventually. So iterators is stuff like what we just looked at with the object guys. So I don't usually like to use this menu because it tends to be very slow for me. So on the side, you'll find Xmanager and Xpool. Xmanager basically shows you all the nodes that are currently inside your Xpresso tag. And Xpool is going to show you all available stuff, including the system presets like rotate and random integer and all that stuff. This is actually pretty handy, especially when you're trying to randomize stuff. So let's go ahead and add a multiplication to this guy, and we basically want to take the global position y and multiply it by -1, so that if it's 200 plus, it's going to be 200 minus. So I'll take a general calculate, and you'll find that there's no like mathematics sort of thing here, and we actually can't drag this out. So what you want is a math add, and we'll bring that out, and you'll see it's math add right now, but we're going to change it to say multiply. So if you select the node, you'll find on the side you have your attributes manager, and you can change a bunch of stuff here. For example, we have data type and function. Now we have our node here, and we have data type and function. So let's take a look at what we can do with this. Function, as you can see, is add, subtract, multiply. So I'll choose multiply. Data type is stuff like if it's a color, if it's a bool, if it's an integer. And in this case, we're actually using real. Now, real is just a number, and an integer is a solid number, which is 1, 2, 3, whereas real is something like 1.2, 1.3. It's decimal places. So if you don't want decimal places, you can use integers, but sometimes you have compatibility issues. So stick with real, and I'll choose multiply. So we have input 1 and input 2, and we also have input 1 and input 2 on this side. So what I'll do is tie 1 to this side, and I want you to take a look at what's going to happen here. I'm going to take sphere's global position y and tie it there, and you'll notice that input 1 has disappeared from here. That's because it already has a value. But in this case, since input 2 is not tied, we can actually type in something here. So I'm going to do -1, and then I'll take the output and tie it to the global position y of the capsule. Once again, nothing happens. So I'll select the sphere, and you can see now we have an opposite relationship. So I can take the sphere and go to coordinates, and you'll see right now we have a y of 282, and on the capsule we have exactly -282. And one other thing you can do is, especially when you have a lot of nodes you're working with, is actually have this -1 as a node. So to do that, we're going to go into general, and we're going to pick a constant node, currently set to real already. We'll just come here to value and set it to -1, and then tie that to that. So now we have this -1 going in as an input on that side. That way we don't have to select this node just to see what value it has. We can just take a look from this view and tell, okay, it's -1. So that's the basics of how Xpresso works. Let's take a moment to look at how to create that weird cube that I made earlier. So in order to do that, we are going to create a new cube again, and I'm going to hide these two, actually disable them, and we now have our cube. Now keep in mind, this Xpresso tag can affect anything and everything inside Cinema. You can affect keyframes, you can affect objects, you can affect tags, all within one single tag, or you could have multiple tags that do the same thing. So I'm going to select double click on this tag to bring up the Xpresso editor again, and I'll bring in the cube, and I'll bring in the cube again. Sorry, that's the Xpresso tag. I'm going to bring in the cube again because I want to output information of the cube to the cube. So I'm going to click on the red side, go to coordinates, global position, and choose here. We actually want to do object properties, size, and then I'll come over here and do let's see here, global position. Now you're probably asking, why am I tying size to global position? If you take a look here, we currently have an object with 200 by 200 on all dimensions. So if you wanted this guy to touch the floor, you'd notice that the floor is actually cutting this in half. So you actually need to take this up to 100, and then you have your cube touching the floor. If you wanted it, say, to touch the z-axis, you just go to x and you write 100. Bam, there you go. And on this other side you write 100, and there you go. You now have your cube that's touching the corner over there. But if I start to adjust this, you'll notice that it's not sticking. So we need to fix that. So I'll go to Xpresso editor, and I'm going to add a calculate node. So calculate, and it's going to be math add. And over here, I'm going to bring in the size to the input, and then under math add, I'm going to do 0.5, because if you noticed, we did because it's 200, we did 100 and it worked, so we just have to divide this by 2, and then I'm going to tie the output to the global position, and then let's take a look at what happens. Let me take my cube, and whoa, okay, what's going on? Let's take a look at our coordinates. 346, but we have 200 and it's showing 346. That's very strange. And once we start to adjust stuff, it just gets really, really weird. This is because, as I said before, we have size, and our size, we chose the size which has all three values inside one. And currently our math add is using a real, so that math is kind of not making sense to Cinema. It's struggling to do that math, and it's gone and done some really weird things. So we kind of need to change a few things here if we want to get the result we want, and that'll be to change the mode of this. So if we go to data type, we can go down to vector, and as the sorry, actually we can't use vector because we can if we do this to multiply, and there you go. Actually, so let me see if this was a real and it was 0.5. I noticed I didn't multiply. Still doesn't work. So let's go ahead and put a vector 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. So basically it's doing this x. The x of this is being multiplied by 0.5 and being taken to the x of this. And that's exactly what's happening for y and z. So now that they're both being divided by 2, we get our cube automatically changing position in order to keep that corner right there, which is pretty cool. So if you want to change something out, you can maybe put this to negative 0.5. Let's see what that does. Puts it on the other side. We can do 0.5 on that side again. But you'll notice that now, because it's tied to this point, I actually can't move it anymore. So how would you go about that? I'd say that you take this guy and throw him into a math add. So let's see, optimize. And I'll take this guy and put him there. And then I'll take this guy, drag him out. And let's see if we'll actually get away with this, because I highly doubt it's going to work. But let's delete port there. And then add it onto the position, which then becomes the position. So naturally, the math does not make sense. And you end up with a ridiculous value over there. So obviously ending up in a loop like this is a very bad idea. So kind of have to figure out how you're going to do that. But as far as I go, that's about it for this introduction to Xpresso. I hope you learned something useful, and in the next set of videos we'll be looking at how to work with thinking particles. So I'd say go out and get used to all this stuff, learn most of these things like logic and all these other guys, and then we can begin working with thinking particles. So I'll see you then.